Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Olivia Rios, Director of Operations and Programs at the LA Latino Chamber of Commerce, and we welcome you to our technical training series. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsor, Southern California Edison, for their support. They have helped make this a free and accessible series available to small business owners in our community. We are excited to have you here with us today, and we hope you take away some golden nuggets. But before we start, I'd like to briefly introduce our chairman, Daryl Salceda, to welcome everyone. Daryl?
Mute myself. Welcome, everybody. It should be very interesting. I don't know much about cybersecurity, but I'm willing and looking to hear more about it. So I want to welcome everybody. How many participants do we have?
Right now we have 17, and I know Jules just texted that there's a few more coming on.
All right. So are we ready to get going?
Yes, we are. Our speakers today will share their knowledge on best practices on how to protect yourself and your business from cybersecurity. We will be discussing phishing, password safety, whether you should have multiple layers of protection in place, and more. But before we start, I'd like to introduce each of our speakers who has vast knowledge in the cybersecurity field. Our first speaker is Peter Bookman. He is a cybersecurity expert and a serial entrepreneur. He created the VPN, which is a virtual private network that is used by many companies today. Currently, he's leading a new cybersecurity company, GuardDog, that simplifies and automates protection from attacks. He has taken 2 companies public on NASDAQ. He's received industry accolades and is a published author on Forbes and is a TEDx speaker. He is based out of Salt Lake City, and today he's joining us from his home in northern San Diego County. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And our second speaker is Mitchell Villarreal. He is the Information Security Associate Specialist with the Cybersecurity Awareness Team at Southern California Edison. While pursuing his undergrad, he joined Southern California Edison as an intern and supported other areas, including cybersecurity incident response team, before joining the awareness team. And then our third speaker is Julius Argumido. Julius is the president of C1P Solutions and is also a board director with the LA Latino Chamber. His company is based out of Long Beach, so he's local. C1P Solutions is a national full-service firm that customizes and manages information technology and cloud-based systems for private, small, and large businesses. C1P Solution also supports government agencies, educational institutions, as well as nonprofits. So just a few housekeeping announcements before we start. We ask that you mute yourself. This is an interaction, so please, if you have questions, put them in the chat box, and I think you know the rest. So let's get started now. Thank you again for joining us. So today's topic is, could you be next? Cybersecurity to protect your business is a relevant topic. Now let's think about this for a second. What does cybersecurity mean to you? I'll be asking our panelists a few questions about cybersecurity and what it means to them, and they'll share their experience and knowledge, and hoping that you get something this afternoon that you can take away and implement right away. And as we know, with the international climate, we need to know that we need to take some safety measures to protect ourselves and our business. As we speak to some of our folks, somewhere at this time, someone is being hacked or their technology is being compromised. And with that, I will ask our first question. So Peter, should businesses get multi-layer security that protects against threats?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, thank you for that question. It's a great way to start this out. It's one of these things where the unfortunate world we live in is whatever the weakest point is likely the way in. Almost every hacker first is going to assess what it all looks like, whatever that is, what your devices look like, what the network looks like, whatever those are, as best they're able, whatever visibility they can get, they'll take advantage of that. So whether you have poor password management and that's easily exploited, or whether you have you're sending information across a network and it's not private, it's not encrypted, or whether you have devices that kind of can roam freely between safe environments and unsafe environments. There's a lot of layers, and this is one of the many reasons why I think it's really important to have people who can help you in your business, personally and otherwise, with navigating those layers and perhaps assessing where your weakest point might be on a consistent basis and improving that.
Thank you. And Julius?
Well, I mean, to echo what Peter's sharing, believe it or not, everybody now has either new equipment, which is great, but it's like he shared, the outdated and the inefficient equipment that is still out there is vulnerable to attacks. So yes, I mean, you have to have multi-layer of security to protect your network and have this defense to support and work and collaborate with each other so they can protect you from the email, from the perimeter, from the internal, from all these malicious things that could happen to your network. Obviously, the more layers you have, the more protection you're gonna have, and less breaches you're gonna see. When you're down to these single layers or these simple layers, then you got a higher risk level of getting hurt or attracting a bad virus or malware, and we'll get more into that on what that can do for the environment long term.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mitchell, from a corporate point of view, can you share about multi-layering security?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For SCE, I was lucky enough to join, I think you mentioned around 2019 was when I got my internship, and most of our cybersecurity has already been kind of mapped out. So I didn't actually get to see how that was built out, but I've talked to a lot of the advisors, a lot of the people who've been with the company since, cybersecurity was just a part of IT. And it really is important to build out your cybersecurity, segment your network, make sure you know what your data is, what you're trying to protect, and where it's all stored. So as we mentioned already, you need to have multi-layered approach to cybersecurity. You cannot store all of the crown jewels or all of the important data in one location, covered by just one tool or one firewall. We like to think of security as an onion. So you want to go deeper into those layers, make sure that the most important data is kind of as deep as you can there. And then, of course, you would actually segment your network to make sure that things that are not so, necessary to protect are maybe on like the first or second layers, a little bit closer to the internet there, or depending how you segment your network, maybe you have certain OUs information kind of stored in one way. But that's kind of the way that we like to look at security from that multi-layered approach. Look at it as an onion. And the deeper you go into those layers, that's where sort of the more important information is stored. And it's, of course, a lot harder to penetrate deeper into those layers. And that's, how you would protect from those types of attacks as best you can.
I love that. And if you don't mind adding to that, it's that, the industry, if you're a cybersecurity professional, you're familiar with the term attack surface management. And basically attack surface management begins with knowing what the map looks like. You might have created it, but it's really difficult to protect yourself if you don't know where the buckets are, where the data is, where those things are. And perhaps, back to seeking help, be able to create those if you don't have those, so you can offer those levels of protection. So well said, Mitchell. That's really a great suggestion and visibility into how you guys do it.
And so my next question, I'll address it to you, Peter. Where can businesses find help to keep them secure?
Yeah, I love this question. I think this is a really, really important one. There is a very large gap in the skill set today between hacker and somebody who protects against hackers. If you're going to become a hacker, sadly, it's a little bit of research and practice. There's a lot of off-the-shelf toolkits and that kind of thing. But as Mitchell was expressing, and also Julius, the tendency to have cybersecurity knowledge enough to protect it is usually years. So weeks to become a hacker, years to learn to protect against that. And so that really creates a need for professionals, people who have been there. I like comparing it to, though I myself fancy myself a handyman and might be able to do sprinklers or something like that around my house, that when that maps to dealing with a sink issue or plumbing issue in my house, sometimes it's worth learning, but most of the time it's worth just getting somebody to do it. And also, once that's done, know what was done, sort of like I heard Mitchell describe with this. So when it comes to attack surface management, I think the most important takeaway I like to see with empowerment is, do you know what's going on? Because that's really important. If I know what's going on, then now I can adjust strategies or see the strategies. And even when the worst happens of needing some sort of an incident response, that we now can come at that from an understanding of how deep, Mitchell described the onions, how deep did it go? How far did they get? What did they get in the crown jewels or the golden nuggets? What did they get? And so I think that's really crucial. And so seeking for an organization like C1P or individuals who can also do that, all of that works really well and brings the whole solutions, whatever anyone else offers.
Sorry for the.
I'm on a virtual call right now.
Yeah, we got Daryl.
Zoom call. That's why.
Well, I mean, the reality is that there's not enough security engineers in today's marketplace, and we're never going to catch up to enough security specialists to support everybody. So we really need to, educate ourselves, empower ourselves to protect our environments, regardless if it's your home office or your business. I mean, everybody is creating these layers, like an onion, to protect themselves from different vulnerabilities. And there are lots of tools, lots of services, but you can get self-educated. But honestly, going to someone like me or anybody in your region that does security can help give you some knowledge, but you still should do your own research to make sure, do they even, someone's got to check the checkers and make sure that they know what they're talking about. But getting multiple opinions is great, but a lot of areas you can go to start with, so you have security 101 built in.
I have a quick question. So how would a small business that makes between 50 to 100,000 find a resource? They might say, I've tried this person, but it was too high. But at the end of the day, you know that your business is more valuable than sometimes the revenue that you make, because the data that you have is really important and key. It's going to be the success to launching and moving forward or elevating your business. So what recommendations can you give to a small business that's just starting out?
Yeah, I think that is troubling, especially as you're describing. In the modern world, we refer to that data as data lakes, and it's one of the most underutilized resources in the world. We are still in the information age, where information is power. So a lot of that information shared, expressed, is worth a lot. And yet the average attack that is successful for a small business costs an average of $200,000 US in the United States. That is, generally speaking, for the reason you asked, Olivia, it's a reason enough to shut down 90% of them. So I like focusing on, it's great to have Mitchell as an example here of what you're looking for is an organization like C1P or people who can help you have your visibility. Because in the end, it is, as a business owner, as a business manager, it comes down to, you're the ones who are accountable. We're the ones who are accountable. And so in order to be that, taking that onion concept Mitchell described, it's nice to know what your layers are. You might have one right now, but then asking a question of how to expand on that. Just today, I had, Best Buy Geek Squad people at my house, and they literally are saying, hey, would you like, this is my expertise too, hey, would you like us to improve your network for you? Well, that's such a simple conversation, and there lies one of the clues, which is, if I say yes, and there's no conditions, there's no, well, tell me about how, or any of this stuff, then I'm going to inherit how much cybersecurity knowledge they have. If I, on the other hand, am able to say, hey, Julius, what would C1P recommend, or what would you recommend? Or hey, Mitchell, what would you recommend? I'm about to improve my network. What would you say? I would suggest I'll get some really great insights, almost all of which will revolve around how I can have visibility into what is going on with that, as opposed to just saying, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just deploy the network, because that is where it stops and starts. And it really isn't that difficult. I hope everybody hears that and sees that, of finding somebody, anyone, and learning to trust. Those might be two different things, but it's worth the pause, because we don't want to see 90% of hacks lead to shutting down small businesses when that data is so invaluable. And when you can just get visibility, whether you got that from a GuardDog solution or a suite of tools from others or whatever's out there, if you have the visibility, then you can shift that from responding, that usually is too late for small businesses or homes, as Julius mentioned, towards we're going to survive that. You can try, but I have the onions, as Mitchell mentioned, that protect me.
So our approach, Olivia, and thank you, Peter, for sharing that. When you're a startup or small business, we need the basics. We need really good internet security, which is normally bundled in a antivirus total care product, as well as a good firewall router. And then in this case, I like to give kudos to GuardDog. If a client, a startup, small business can invest into a GuardDog unit, these units are actually built to do remote detection and response. They don't remediate. That's where you bring in a managed security service professional to remove the threat or attack from the environment. But for the dollar, for the cost amount, and for what the product does, GuardDog, it really does a great job providing what they call like an ongoing vulnerability assessment or penetration testing to kind of see where the holes are in your security network, in your small business or startup. And that's really key of having some sort of service that's cost effective. And I think everybody on the planet that's a managed security service professional that supports or educates a client starting off is going to ask them, what kind of antivirus do you have and where's your firewall? And then we start at that level, and then you get really fancy with all the other tools and services and things you can buy from there. And obviously, Mitchell can probably share that on their landscape, then they have behavioral analytics and AI and all kinds of digital certificates incorporated to really lock it down. But a small business owner can get away with a really good name brand antivirus, which will have that internet security and a good firewall router.
Okay, thank you. And then this is going to be an open question to all three speakers. Can you provide a short list for organizations to prepare for random attacks or data breaches?
Yeah, I think that a short list of preparation is really kind of, and thanks for recommending and describing GuardDog. Certainly, we're very proud of making it simple to visualize your attack surface, whether distributed. Many of us have been working from home for quite a while, and our home networks are attached in some way or another to the other networks and what have you. Having visibility is crucial. And Julius introduced this vulnerability assessment or penetration testing. This is done regularly in larger organizations, and often not able to be done because of a manual process with people often doing this manually, and automating that, or at least getting that from somewhere. Basically being able to, the checklist is really simple from my view. It's one thing to start. The one thing is, so that you can know what's going on, get an outside in view approach and an inside view approach of what your attack surface looks like, where I'm vulnerable, what I can do. From there, now you can begin this process that many of us look at like physical or mental health, only now we're talking about digital health. Cyber hygiene is a word I prefer over cybersecurity, that says we're going to live this weekly, monthly, daily, but begin with that cyber check. The checklist I'd suggest is really one thing with a follow-up that says, let's manage the attack surface once we see it. So seeking from a professional or a service like GuardDog offers just as a tool allows you to see what's going on. And now that allows you to move your vulnerability up or down based upon choices to create the onion. Mitchell described it, whether you're involved with that or not. If you have that, now you can create that, the layers, the protection. And if you're small, there's never a better time than that, because it can be much simpler than when you're managing many sites and those kind of things as we grow. And of course, we want to all support the growth of small businesses and medium-sized businesses, as well as distributed enterprise, as best we're able to.
Okay, and Julius?
Yeah, so are we here where 90% of all these breaches are happening or at the email level? So regardless if you have a Microsoft Exchange account or an Office 365 or Google, I'm going back to where I shared before, having a strong antivirus, internet security, like a total threat protection bundle on your network to begin with, and a strong and a good firewall. Doesn't have to be enterprise class, but it can be middle of the road with the router. That will take care of a lot of those breaches, so you don't become a botnet someday. And that's where you would want to start as a short list, you know, for these small startups and existing small business. I mean, we would look at those and see where we can either optimize it and turn on services or turn off services, because you do have to configure these routers to policies that are going to make sense for that business.
And Mitchell, your input.
Yeah, absolutely. Julius, I like that you mentioned 90% of those breaches really starting at the email level. I know we are going to talk more in detail about phishing later, but that is 100% true. And also, you know, to kind of go off of what you were talking about, Peter, is once you do have that visibility, I think what's important to know is that when you have a visibility into your organization, into your network, you know not only what is active, what is on your network, and what you're looking for. I think it's very important to establish that baseline of what's normal. So you want to make sure you're logging. You want to make sure that you're seeing what is normal activity on my network. And from there, you can start to see those anomalies. You can start to see, okay, now I know when something looks off. That could be a potential incident that could be worth looking into. And that's where your incident response team would come into play. Once that incident response team has an idea of what are those anomalies, the best way to prepare, you know, it's really hard for me to think of a short checklist of just things to prepare for. But the one thing that I can suggest, you got to make sure that they have run books and that they have an ability to kind of practice and see, you know, what would we do in these particular situations, so that that incident response team can act fast. They can not only find the threat, remediate it, but also make sure that they're completely patching it up in the case that, you know, it happens again, or in case there's a reinfection, depending on what that particular incident is. But that's something that you could do to prepare for those random attacks or those data breaches, especially the well-known ones. If your cyber intel tells you that these are some well-known attacks and these are what other companies are doing to prevent against them, then you can train your incident response team. You can make sure that you're basically training your organization to prepare for those, depending on what could hit you, either what has the most risk of hitting you, or if it does hit you and it is successful, what could cause the most damage in your organization. And that goes from both small to large organizations.
So I do want to add one more thing, just to kind of add to those multi-layer of security. After you do that short checklist and you start evolving as a business, and you start putting more importance on protecting your environment and your technology and your data and your financials. We're always, asking clients to purchase email security, malware protection, do data encryption. We turn on multi-factor authentication, get really cool about the whole environment and adding all these features. Obviously, there's a cost associated to it. So that's why you start with the basics, and then you grow from there on based on your budget and what your needs are, and how comfortable do you want to sleep at night knowing everything has different layers working together.
Thank you. So we have a question from one of our guests, Angelica, and the question is for Mitchell. Cybersecurity insurance is now being required by government entities when responding to RFPs, in addition to our general liability and errors and omission insurance. What would Edison be looking for a contractor working along with the Edison team to support communication efforts?
That is a great question. I'm going to be honest, working as far as with the contractors, that is a little bit beyond what I currently do within the company. But you're right, you're correct. Cybersecurity insurance is now being required from a lot of these government organizations. And I think it goes to the fact that cybersecurity is becoming more and more of a recognized need. And yes, I can tell you that our company we do have there's a big process involved in whenever we are looking for contractors, whenever we are looking for basically third-party business partners that we work with. It does go through a rigorous process, which is very hard to describe, and I can't even describe it honestly from my position currently. But one of the things that, as far as cybersecurity is concerned, all vendors and all tools that we implement, all contractors that we work with, go through like a rigorous cybersecurity risk assessment. So that's another thing that is important in any business, making sure that you're analyzing that cybersecurity risk, and that does go to support kind of that growing need for cybersecurity, making sure that all of these business partners that you work with, as I think Julius said, you've got to check the checkers, right? So that's a great way to describe how we sort of have to vet all of the people, all of the contractors and third-party business partners we work with. But that's about as far or as high level as I can answer that question. I don't know if I know it's not necessarily related to my company, Edison in particular, but if any of the other panelists would like to add on to that.
The deductible for cybersecurity for some of these organizations are like $500,000. So, that it costs more. It would be more cost effective to add these layers of security in order to have to avoid having to use your policy. Seen that happen a few times now. Very expensive.
What I love about this question and this opportunity is it does speak, as I'm hearing my fellow panelists describe, to the need for this. There was a really well-documented hack that took place with Target, the superstore, a couple of years ago, where they had a partner. It wasn't even like a formal partner. It was more like a pilot partner. Like, hey, let's let them sell HVAC, air conditioning and that kind of stuff through one of their stores. So they connected that up. And in order to do that, they had to be able to set up bidding and those kind of things. And in simply connecting those systems and in handshaking, they did have an agreement about what could be expected, but they did not have an auditing concept. They, once again, to come back to the theme I think all of us are sharing here, we need to know what's going on. And they simply didn't. They simply handshook and said, okay, I'll let you in, you let me in. And the rest, unfortunately, was very expensive because it was to my knowledge, the largest breach in that conglomerate's history. Target itself did not get hacked. The distributed enterprise attached to them, namely the HVAC company, did, and through that came into Target and basically got their entire list of transactions from that. And so I think what's being asked is wonderful, both about the insurance that Julius added to, and as well as the need for knowing what's going on with their partner or systems, as Mitchell responded. I think that's really important. There's a theme I'm hearing, which is, and absolutely agree with, which is we need to know what's going on, because the biggest cost is that we don't. So often we either are so overwhelmed and daunted. I'm hoping that we can walk away from this call understanding perhaps it's worth the exploration to hit it head on, to contact a C1P, contact someone and ask questions, because knowing what's going on will give you that protection, hopefully avoiding the $500,000 deductible. Because again, back to the great question we started with, Olivia, like a small organization that profits $50,000 a year can neither afford that deductible or can afford a $200,000 breach. And so being able to have these conversations and understand that it's likely a lot less, perhaps as much as little as $100 a month to have the visibility part, as little as being able to have a managed service or cybersecurity service company that has, for hundreds of dollars a month, can now offer the email stuff or whatever else. Usually that's per user, like how many people are attached. And that's a great thing to have now, because a lot of the organizations I work with and have worked with bundle the parts that I'm hearing Julius describe, like managing email, managing these things, can be bundled with cybersecurity policy along with it of saying, well, I'm giving you Office 365 for your email solution per user, and I'll just charge another X amount per user to also ensure that there's two-factor authentication and all these things that you may not understand, but you also don't necessarily need to, as much as to understand what's possible and what that threat score, if you will, might look like, what the attack surface looks like. So beautifully said on all fronts. Thanks, Mitchell. I appreciate you inviting us.
Well, thank you, everyone. So our next question is, and an open question again, can you describe Botnet and how it affects businesses?
I can start with that one. So Botnet, I mean, it's basically named after a rogue bot and a network. Cyber criminals are basically infecting PCs, Mac, your cell phones with malware, and they're basically taking over your environment, remotely managing through your network, you know, using their whatever spyware, whatever software they have to control either a small environment or even thousands of machines that are infected, working together to deliver all kinds of cyber crimes to companies. I mean, I wrote some examples here. For example, they spread DDoS attacks. They spread more malware. There's online fraud going on, wide scale spam, and tons of phishing campaigns. Now, the consequence of being part of a large botnet is very serious now, because you know you're responsible for your equipment. So you might be experiencing high internet bills, a slow and very unstable computer environment or performance, potentially legal implications if your computer is compromised, stolen personal data that could be used in either blackmail or identity theft. Becoming a victim of a botnet is it's pretty easy. All you got to do is download a file or share a file with somebody that has malware. Social media sites have been tremendous this last year. I think they had their biggest year in 2021 with all these crazy, you know, ways to open up accounts, you know, a lot of catfishing going on. I guess the best form of making sure you're not infected is installing anti-phishing software. Once again, the GuardDog is another great product that we sell and support and promote to contain these phishing attacks, or just in case you open something, it'll contain the threat or attack in your environment, and then you call your IT guy to remove it. So that's what a botnet is, and a lot of us unfortunately live with it. And obviously, the less security tools you have on your network, the more susceptible you are to getting hurt.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I fancy myself in some circles. I'm considered a cybersecurity professional. And I will say it's awfully interesting, and to add to what Julius is describing, the sad truth is some of these are very sophisticated, just jumping ahead to phishing and saying they're sophisticated enough that I would be misleading to say I'm not at least tempted to click on them. You know, these can take really interesting various forms. The more public you are, you know, at GuardDog, we're not necessarily, we are all over the world now and what have you, but just recently I had one of my internal IT folks message me on our internal team system. We use Microsoft for that, and asked, hey, did you text me because the number doesn't match? And I said, no, thanks for asking. Why don't you share and ask? We are a cybersecurity company. He did. And this was somebody who made, like Jules was describing, a social media. It looked like me, wrong number, but looked like me, and is asking this person to go do something on my behalf. In this case, hey, go get some Amazon gift cards for the company, you know? And I wouldn't blame him. I wouldn't if he said, okay, you know, I'm trying to impress my boss, you know? And so in this world of botnets where I may not be me, it's really that much more important that we have that onion defined. We have the awareness, we have the protections, so that, yeah, I think it's absolutely worth doing everything we can so that as Julius and Mitchell invited, the email is the most likely entry point. The reason for that is because that's the easiest way inside, you know, from outside to inside. You know, going through what's called a firewall, which is designed to stop outside to inside, is a lot more difficult than tricking you into inviting me in, kind of like a vampire. Hey, click on this and now I'm in. And once I'm in, that's when the real fun begins. So I think it's very critical that we're aware of botnets, not because we necessarily need to fear them, but same as the other conversations where we need to do what we can to be aware that they exist, do what we can to not be a member of it, as Julius pointed out, and do what we can so that we can create those layers that only allow for going so far, such as, yeah, thanks for mentioning one of the stories I'll share about that and a botnet. And was we presented at a trade show last year. It was a cybersecurity trade show, so we got attention. My executive vice president of business development, amazing, did such a good job, says, here's my name, whatever else. They know her email at this point, you know, and so they send her an email. She, I don't blame her, clicks on it. We have all the tools and everything, but clicks on it. It absolutely turned her machine into a bot. That's what happened. Now, what is really important, back to Mitchell's point and Julius talking about what happened after that, is where this gets very important. Once it hit the network and tried to spread, Mitchell mentioned the anomalies, right? If you have a baseline, if you know what's going on, you can now say, hey, I know that machine, and the stuff you're trying to do on the network to spread is weird. It doesn't match. And let's do something about that. So over the course of 2 hours, because she herself is not a cybersecurity professional, who amongst us is, there was over 400 attempts to spread on the network. Wow. All 400 happened to be responded to and stopped, leaving only the machine that was clicked on in the email still a bot, which, as Julius mentioned, an IT organization, we happen to use an organization very much like Julius as well as their organization, being able to have them respond and simply do something that now is fairly trivial, roll back the machine to when it was not a bot. And the rest becomes, I'm not hurting anybody outside. That is a nightmare, because as Julius mentioned, the law is written that we're accountable for our systems. But worse yet, or more alarming, is my own systems. We want to protect our data and the crown jewels, the crown golden nuggets. And it did that, and it was great. So I really appreciate how, yeah, being aware of botnets, and also how we can prevent or take action to protect ourselves from either being in one or needing to respond to somebody using them against us.
And our next question is, now ask Mitchell, how can a business manage phishing attacks?
Oh, that's a great question. It's an exciting question too, because this is really where, cybersecurity awareness is about, educating the employees, right? So now moving from that technical aspect of cybersecurity, like moving away from the tools that we implement in our network to actually make sure that we're preventing, or even from the incident response side, where we're actually responding to those hackers and we're stopping them in their tracks. With awareness, it deals with people. And the one most important cyber attack that does, leverage that aspect of human error, the cyber attack that relies on people to, as Julius mentioned, to invite them in, is going to be phishing. And it does account for over 90% of all of the cybersecurity and data breaches that you'll hear about in the news. So phishing, at a high level, of course, is when someone sends you a message, either on email, of course, it could be sent through text, through social media messaging, but that message usually contains a link or an attachment. Typically, it's a link, and they want you to click on that link. The link is going to either download some type of malicious software to your device. We talked about botnets. Of course, phishing attacks could make you a part of that botnet unwillingly, but a phishing link can also take you to a website. And we talk a lot about credential harvesting in our company. So in our training, whenever we're talking about educating users on the threats of cybersecurity, not just at work, but also at home, we do talk about credential harvesting a lot. And credential harvesting is basically when an attacker sets up a website that looks familiar to you. It might look like a website you're used to, a website that you log into, even something like Microsoft. And they've set it up to have that login page, enter your email, enter your username and password. And from there, sophisticated credential harvesting attacks can steal your information. And then in some cases, they might even like redirect you to the official Microsoft website, and it will all happen on the back end. You won't even know that someone just stole your information. You might just think, oh, I entered my password wrong. But what you actually did was you entered your password into one of those phishing websites. And from there, that attacker could use your information to either log into your actual account, steal some more personally identifiable information or other financial information from there, or they could actually sell your information on the dark web. So that's very important to make sure that we are educating our users. Again, cybersecurity awareness. So I do talk about this a lot. And that's one of the ways I think businesses can manage phishing attacks. It is important to have that education to make sure that users are aware that anything they click on could potentially be malicious. Also making sure that people know how to recognize when is an email coming from an actual internal company domain, when is it coming from a trusted source, and when do those domains look like they might be spoofed, they might be misspelled in some ways. A lot of times those cyber criminals misspell a lot of the things in their emails. They're not always the best, and making sure that they look 100% like the actual vendor or the actual business partner that you work with. But if you're able to kind of see those red flags, that's one way to manage it. And of course, there are technical solutions as well. So there are email gateways, there are email detection software, again, a lot of which are bundled with some of the suites. So Microsoft, of course, has a lot of email detection in place as well. And at that point, it just becomes part of training your cybersecurity team or your IT team, at least to know what to look for. So if you get an alert from Microsoft saying that, X amount of emails were quarantined by our email detection software, and then you take a look at those domains, you take a look at those emails, and you decide that actually these are, suspicious emails, then we can pull them, we can quarantine them from users' inboxes. And it takes a lot of fine tuning as well. So you have to adjust your rules, make sure that, of course, email detection software are not quarantining legitimate messages. So make sure that you have safe listing in place in those cases. But that's just one of the many technical tools that you could implement to prevent and manage those phishing attacks. And there's a ton more. Yeah.
Is phishing a cybercrime, and what are the penalties?
So yeah, phishing is a cybercrime. In fact, it also depends too. Cybercrime is very difficult to, again, attribute, first of all. It's hard to tell where someone is when they're actually committing these cyber crimes and they're sending out these attacks. So that's hard. And because of that, it becomes hard to penalize a lot of these cyber criminals. But the real cybercrime is, taking that information, stealing that information from unsuspecting users, and then using that for financial gain. So as I mentioned before, either phishing you for your bank account information and then trying to get into your bank, or selling your information, selling your credentials on the dark web. That's probably the biggest cybercrime, and that's where a lot of the money is made.
Yeah, the unfortunate truth is that, here's the good news. It is absolutely illegal and criminal. And the FBI, amongst others, absolutely has task forces for this. The challenge is, this is the first time you're hearing about a concept called the dark web. The dark web largely is built like we want the internet to be private and anonymous. So the reason why that becomes important is most of the time, any sophisticated hacker, and I mentioned it's very easily to become one of these, the hiding part of where I come from is a fairly simple endeavor. So unless you have an analyst like Mitchell or someone like that who has enough data beforehand to be able to reconstruct enough to be able to profile or whatever else, you have a real challenge on your hands. And this is great. This isn't new. And to add to that, I hope, Mitchell, is there's really two types of phishing that's been around for a very, very long time. One of the world's most famous hackers ever, a guy by the name of Kevin Mitnick, famously went to prison for this. And we can group these together as their social hacks. So even though he didn't hack, what he did is he used what we call the box of chocolate experiment. And the box of chocolate experiment is when I go to your receptionist, if you happen to have an office, and I bring a box of chocolates, and no, I'm not trying to bribe him or her, but I am going to say, I'm going to act because they're wearing a badge or whatever else, like I know them. I'm going to come in with a box of chocolates, and I'm going to appear, just like Mitchell said about email, as though you know me, or you should. In fact, I'm going to flat out embarrass you that you don't know me. That's the goal. I'm going to come in and say, hi, Olivia, here's this box of chocolates. You deserve it. Wasn't your birthday like a month ago? And I'm guessing, but you say, oh, yeah, no, whatever. But at this point, what I've stimulated in you is you think we're supposed to know each other. And then I say, oh, shoot, I left my badge at home. Can you let me in? And here is, as Mitchell's describing about awareness, and I think Julius mentioned it earlier about awareness, 80% of people who are human, we're human, are gonna let you through. They're gonna say, they should, right? At the end of the day, let's understand the dynamic. You know, we like each other. We want to help each other. We're not in business to be paranoid. So, you know, forgetting a badge happens, you know, a gift of awareness happens. So there's two types of phishing. There's the, hey, I'm giving you something, click here. And then there's the, you're in deep doo-doo. You did something wrong type of phishing that says you've already, one of my favorite ones, I imagine Mitchell alluded to it, is Microsoft. That one tends to look a lot like, to give you guys quick training, it'll tend to look a lot like your credentials have already been compromised. We need you to log in again. And you'll click on it because it looks like Microsoft, it acts like Microsoft, and you have even been trained by Mitchell and others to say, I need to keep myself safe. So when Microsoft comes and says, you need to keep yourself safe, I believe it. So I click on that. So this phishing is very real and awareness is very real. Kevin Mitnick, to illustrate that, has an entire company that simulates, and I assume the bigger organizations will do that for educational purposes, but it's worth being aware of and watching for probably the oldest form of attacking or hacking that has been, which is social hacking. The one that says, I'm going to make you feel something, good or bad, and in doing so, exchange those clicks. And that's why being aware is number one. Same thing as we've been talking about this whole time, of let's be aware of what's going on, and maybe even have tools that say something weird is going on here. And that's invaluable, however you get those and however you arrive there.
Okay. Well,
Just-
thank
Let me add to that real quick, Olivia.
yes.
So a lot of us, just to see more, I mean, even on your phones now, you're starting to get a lot of texts for tracking your mail. You got, your package is on its way. I mean, there's a lot of great, we used to just sell and give a lot of tools to do anti-phishing, turn on services, etc. And you do need the security awareness training that a lot of companies are offering now, like Barracuda, Brainstorm. We talked earlier, Mitchell, KnowBe4 is a really good one that's out there now, to really educate those users that are coming in new to the workforce, that are really, virgin to what's going on out there, because their first day they could be hit hard and they don't even know it, thinking they have to do something for their boss or validate their email. It's evolving on both sides. We're getting better, but we have to empower ourselves to get smarter and educate ourselves on what's going out there. And then listening to the news on what's going on. I mean, a lot of us heard about Sony and Target. Those things will always give great announcements on what's going out there. So you got to kind of keep your ears down to the ground and be ready.
Well, we have a couple minutes left. I'd
Okay.
like to open it up to the audience to see if anyone has questions that we, now that we have a couple of panelists who are subject matter experts. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Oh, here we go. Gloria, I came in a little late. Okay, well, we have no direct questions to our panelist. So just real quickly, what are you currently seeing in cyber attacks that's new that we should be aware of?
Wow, that is the forefront. I'm sure I share with my fellow panelists. That's where we like to live. There's this concept, advanced threat detection. Many of the tools today infer the real problem. We call it a 0-day virus or a 0-day vulnerability or attack or exploit. In other words, the challenge is always there. That's why I like the word cyber hygiene for each one of us. That's why we train and educate, and that's why knowledge really is power. Wisdom, perhaps even more so, having survived something, gives the more that happens, the more we're aware, the more we can click on something. I'll go back to my executive vice president of business development. Having clicked on it, having had that happen, she's far more vigilant now than she was before. And so there's a lot to be said from experience that has all of these things wrapped into over time. Cyber hygiene is we can consistently look at our attack surface, know that email is 90% of that vulnerability, and pay a lot of attention there and build the onion, if you will, the layers out from there and in from there, so that each one of these things has awareness and understanding with it, so that we can all be more protective of our own corporate resources. And I think I really appreciate the opportunity to be here for all of you. Our aim at GuardDog and myself is let's use cyber hygiene and demystify it. Let's make it simpler. Let's make it something that we all can at least know what's going on, even if we don't know how to do it. I had one of my early deployments, which says we're on the right track, was in a home. As Julius mentioned, a lot of us went home, and this particular home was managed by the wife of the home, from the router and those kind of things. Like, she keeps track of her kids, and they actually have a lot of tools deployed. But in seeing the threat score or the attack surface, it was natural for her to immediately reach out and ask her husband, hey, how do I manipulate that threat score? How do I get safer? Or how do I protect my home more? And so that visibility component, regardless of how you get it, training, vulnerability assessments, partner, I do want to kind of back up a little bit, because Mitchell mentioned it, and I want to honor, for example, Julius and services like that. Microsoft absolutely offers built-in services if you happen to be using that. Many of however, as Mitchell mentioned, the training and the management of those potential threats is something that most IT departments would definitely seek help for. So it's worth asking and getting that understanding. So once again, appreciate it. I hope we as a panel and myself have been able to help you guys, all of you, to pay attention to your cyber hygiene, feel empowered about your cyber hygiene, and let's use that to be safer, to feel safer in the world we're in, and in the coming world of metaverse and Web3 and all these other fun buzz things in tech that are coming, and we'll be safer. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. And we do have one last question. It's from Angelica. What are sites or blogs do you recommend we follow as cyber novices to keep ourselves educated and informed?
So I shared one with her. I like www.c like Charlie, y like yellow, where.com, cywhere.com. I mean, there's honestly like 10,000 reports of cyber attacks daily being uploaded there, so you can review, because social media was a goldmine for scammers in 2021. They're creating these forums that you can find and protect yourself and ask questions. For example, there's so many things out there that are providing now new fake NFTs, cryptos, and stock investments that you do really need to double check what's going on out there. So find a good forum that you can trust, and you'll be okay from that perspective.
Thank you. Is there any other questions before we end our session? I don't see any more, but any last word of advice?
Yeah, I think I'll add that I am biased, lest it be misunderstood. As mentioned, I've authored for some of these sites, so I absolutely applaud and want to echo what Julia said. If you want to dive into the deep end, that is an absolutely wonderful site. It would surprise me, and I don't know if Julius, you'd agree, that if you go there, you're probably going to feel like an immediate need to take some action, because what it shows you is just how dangerous it is out there. I have written for Cyber Defense magazine, and the thing I like about that is this kind of magazine format. It's a lot less often. It's a good marry the two, because it has a little bit more metaphorical approaches to cybersecurity. So it's not just, hey, here's the common vulnerability and exploits database that has vulnerabilities and the exploits and all of these kind of things and attacks. It instead is more like, it might, in the topics we've been discussing, there might be an article coming out that's gone phishing, for example, that's let's talk about phishing, PHISHING, for those of you who didn't know when we were talking about phishing and what that is and how you can find it. But let's talk about it from a perspective of the humanness of cyber hygiene, stuff like that. So yeah, I really appreciate being here. My fellow panelists are amazing. I'm humbled to be with both of you guys, and you, Olivia, thanks so much. And all of you out there. I know and certainly I am very excited to contribute to more of a safer online experience, as Julius mentioned, those NFTs and what have you.
Thank you, Peter. And Mitchell.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't echo what Peter and my other panelists here are saying enough. Absolutely. It's a great opportunity to be here and to share our experience and knowledge with you all. I think, especially with myself, when I first started really getting into the weeds of cybersecurity, it does seem like a very doom and gloom type of thing. You almost feel like, well, what can I do, right? If a hacker really wants to attack me, they're going to. What am I going to be able to do about it? But I guess what I can leave you all with is sort of on that positive note, right? Even though, of course, cybercrime is increasing, I feel like we've talked about it a lot today. So is that need for cybersecurity. So I just came from college, and I really like to see that colleges nowadays are offering a lot more programs in cybersecurity. They're offering not just those certifications, but also degrees. And we're starting to see a lot of new talent really coming in with that cybersecurity focus, more so than we've ever seen in the past. And we start to see companies start to implement, a more robust cybersecurity posture. So even though it does seem like a lot of doom and gloom, I think that especially for a consumer or someone, a small business or someone who just uses the internet for recreational use, a lot of these companies that you're going to be, making accounts with and actually using either in your daily life or at work, a lot of them hopefully are taking that step to move more towards a security mindset. And here in California, of course, we have things like the Consumer Privacy Act. So we know that a lot of companies now are making sure that they're protecting their customers' data to the best of their ability, because it does harm everybody. If someone, is victim of a data breach, it not only harms those customers, but it harms the companies. And people are starting to realize that. Companies are ramping up their cybersecurity posture. So definitely make sure that if you want to learn more about cybersecurity, take a look at those blogs, maybe look at what's going on in the security world and educate yourself about that. But at the same time, also take a look at what you're using on a daily basis. Maybe try to clean up your online presence. If you have some type of application or shopping app on your phone or a social media account that you no longer use, maybe kind of make an inventory of where you're located online and see where you can kind of erase things that are not necessary. But there's a lot more to it. And again, thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone took away something from this presentation.
Thank you. And Julius.
I want to say thank you to my co-panelists, Southern California Edison, for hosting this, Mitchell, and Peter Bookman. Always a pleasure to work with GuardDog and allowing me to share my knowledge and my experience. I've been in IT for 30 years. One thing we didn't really cover, but I'll share it with everybody, is change your password every 90 days. Turn on multi-factor authentication, make your password difficulty with numbers, letters, capitals, and characters. And, we're here on the good, winning this good fight together, and it's going to happen. We got good products, emerging technologies like GuardDog that are hitting the market that make it a lot easier for us to worry about those problems later after we contain these threats and attacks. But understanding them now is important. So thank you.
Thank you. So it looks like we got one more question. What is the best app to blog robot calls or texts?
RoboKiller. That's a great application. I subscribe to that now. I think it's like $59.99 a year.
Okay, and the last one more. What is the average cost of a bundle?
If you want to buy a 1 year, 3 year, like a total threat protection from Trend Micro, $20 a year, 25, per user. You might get a better deal through GuardDog.
Yeah, I think that we've been talking about that, and great. So that's from Mina, and I appreciate that. And I have no doubt you can probably further that question. But I think the great world we live in, as you mentioned earlier, is so much of what is available is as a service, like per person per month or per site per month. This makes it very approachable as a cost of doing business, because if you can build your business model around how many people you have working with you for you, and you pay them, and this is the cost for doing business, then it's very nominal. It's in the you know, we're in the cybersecurity world. We're needing to keep things very tightened up. We use antivirus, firewall, VPN, we use all of it. And we're still in the, you know, less than hundreds per person per month is the kind of thing. And I absolutely, again, that's including having the services side, not just the tools, but somebody to manage them as well, or manage my IT team doing them both. And I have both. I have an IT team and that.
Okay, yeah, and that should be part of our operational cost. I mean, regardless of the size of the business, it's like you keep the lights on, you keep your security on. It's as easy as that. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time, your knowledge, your wisdom, and everything that you shared with us. We hope that everyone went away with some great information. You can always reach us here at the chamber. You know our information, info@lalcc.org, or you can call us at 213-422-9019. And lastly, I'd like to say thank you for the chamber, and especially Southern California Edison for allowing us to put this on together. And we have a great program with SCE this year where we'll be bringing additional workshops to our platforms. And some of our future topics include bid proposal series, new construction, energy efficiency, PSPS, and business resiliency. So keep tuned. I will share those on our calendar of events as well as our social media. But lastly, don't miss out on our next webinar, which is scheduled for April 20th, and it's meeting the needs of restaurants. And you can, again, you can register online, and it's sourcing workforce and how to lower your payroll cost. And on that note, I thank you and have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you all.